Hit record. Do. We are recording.
Groovy.
And yeah, so are you ready?
I am ready-ish, I guess. I'm, like I said when we started, how's your week going? And I think I'm noticing that it feels like, again, I don't really watch the news on purpose. I boycott the media, quite frankly, and I just look via the internet things that come my way that I find interesting and do my own searches. So I don't know, like, kind of what is happening, but it feels like, from at least my purview, that it's not as intense as it was even 2 weeks ago within our culture. So I don't know like, I've seen things that's still shocking. I literally I even saved some things because I'm like, okay, I do want to note these things that are just like people who have tried to lynch people for going on property. Did you see that?
No.
Oh my
I'm
God.
aware of like the previous like 5 lynchings that has happened over the past like month and a half, but I didn't know that people were trying to lynch people like that is news to me.
Well, I'm not kidding you. I saw it just the other day, and I was like, and it was a guy in Indiana. I'm trying to get to it. I just had it, and then it went away. He was on somebody's property, and they grabbed him and like were going to lynch him, attempted lynching in his car. I'm going to pull it up right now. And it was a guy by the name of this. He was an activist, and they were on video on the 4th of July, 2020 in Lake Monroe, Indiana. And they literally had him surrounded. This Vox Booker and a group of friends went to Lake Monroe in Bloomington, Indiana, to watch the lunar eclipse, and says he was encountered by a man with a Confederate hat who said he and his friends were on private property. And Booker said to the group, they apologized and they were ready to walk away. And then he was assaulted by a group of 5 white men and pinned to a tree. And literally there's video of him pinned to the tree. And I'm not kidding you. It is like the old South, and they're like, we're going to see you soon. And they're like, you go, to the guy who's taking the camera. Like, get out of here. Guys, get the F out of here. Get the fuck out. Get your phones out of here. Go. Shake your head at me. Get whatever. Get the fuck out of here. Booker says the 5 men ripped off some of his hair and jumped on his neck at one point during the attack, and said that they were going to break his arms. And they're cursing at the camera the whole time. And then they said, get a noose. And during the attack, Booker's friends, as well bystanders, intervened, some of the women, and the assailants eventually let go of him and continued, though, to follow him. And then there's like, are you happy about this, you fucking nappy-headed bitch? You happy about this? And you nappy-headed bitch, what do you want to... He's like, what do you want? You with your 5 white friends? Don't... Like, they're just going back and forth. But I'm hearing this, like... And it goes on. And it is old school, these typical, what you would see in a movie clip, white men, just dumbasses, but strong. And I'm just like, oh God. And they just keep going on.
Yeah, I think, I think the accurate, I guess, category or description of them isn't being a dumbass, it's them being racist. And
right, but this is like old school skinhead redneck.
Well, it's that's just
it's totally racist. Yes,
you know,
it's totally
but that's trying to sort of classify it as anything else or trying to find other words to describe it. I think these are the opportunities to be as candid as possible. Like this is pure blank racism.
Yes,
at its core, at its finest.
Completely, it is completely. Yes, but yeah. And you're right. You categorize it as as just being, it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
flagrant.
visceral. Like it's
It's
very visceral.
it's like, where in God's earth? And I literally saw another clip today of this couple in New York who were in Connecticut, and they attacked one of the desk people who was like helping somebody get ice because their water was not right. And they literally, this man punched this woman in the face and was kicking he and his girlfriend or whatever. And I'm like, where do you come from to think that you can do this? And she was
Well,
a Black woman, but and they were white. I don't know if it was race motivated, but somehow you think you can do this to somebody.
yeah. And I think that brings up the point that often a lot of Black people have to sort of have that internal dialogue with when they experience these sort of things. It's can you wholeheartedly say that there isn't a racial component to it? Uh, Often they'll say like, oh, you have to try to prove that there was a racial component, but understanding sort of the historical context and things that often happen to specific people, the like um the counter to saying like, oh, prove that it was racism, it's like, prove that it wasn't racist, understanding what we know, to where we have there's precedent already set for for these specific instances, and so often Black people look to that precedent and say that like, we can't say that it wasn't because of my skin color that I experienced this, because you often don't hear about that stuff with other people that aren't that aren't of the same that don't have have to deal with the realities of that skin color. And so it's yeah, it's just really interesting sort of seeing the responses and how people sort of describe the instance outside of sort of the actions that take place. When they go into sort of the philosophy of like, why would somebody do that? It's like, well, looking at everything, it's it's there's precedent to lead one to a certain conclusion, or at least there's a opportunity to understand it based on sort of what we see and what we know. I mean, because we all at some point we all paid attention to in history class when they talked about segregation, and they talked about the movie Roots, and slavery and the Civil War. Like, we're not ignorant to it. It's just that we often people think that that wasn't a generation, or that wasn't like this generation. People that existed this
That was back
generation.
then. That's not now.
Yeah, but those same people literally still are alive. Like
Oh
it's
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
and so it's very interesting to sort of see. Um, it's very interesting to see that sort of cognitive dissonance. That's what it is, cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. And we've said that word before. So it is. And it's something that, again, there's people, again, even in the circle that I live in, that there's people who would never call themselves racist. And I don't know that they are. I think that they just feel like, I don't have to be involved with this. I don't want to be involved with this. I'm not interested in this. I just live in my little world, taking care of my family, and I don't have anything against Black people or white people or Mexicans or, the whole lot of it, right? And I find myself, who do I address? Like, when I see things, even on social media, I'm like, do I really want to jump in with a thought or comment here? I
Yeah.
don't necessarily like what I hear. I don't agree with what I hear or read. But I'm like, what's the point? What's the point of commenting? Because what I feel like is people, at least within the circle that I am, they're just like almost not even participating on social media anymore because it's there's nothing that they want to see on social media, and people want to go back to just babies and you know um, what you're eating today or drinking today or how the weather is or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, let's get by this. And if we're not, I just am going to be on my life. I'm not going to be in social media. That's at least my purview to some of this. So the thought of commenting, am I going to make a difference? And I think my belief is this, you're either preaching to the choir or people just aren't even paying attention anymore. They don't want to pay attention. It's like, enough already, enough already. And I think, am I really going to shift a perspective here? Or am I just throwing down a thought to the ethos where it's not going to be taken seriously or of value? And so I choose not to respond, quite frankly. I just move on. I'm just like, it's
Yeah.
not going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference, at least within the circle that I think that it's being seen in to some degree.
Well,
Um,
I think um, and this always I always go back to sort of the experiences that, sort of like my grandparents talked about, not necessarily my parents, but like my grandparents, particularly like my grandfather talked about, where he, he, he was a veteran, he went overseas and stuff. This was post World War II. And so this was sort of like the period post World War II and pre Cold War. I think, was it pre Cold War? Like that sort of, um,
mhm.
that like in
It's
that
right after
area.
World War II. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I always go back to the realities of a black veteran, from Texas that, um, traveled abroad, got to see a bunch of different things, fought for his country, much like every other, military veteran. And he came back and he had to deal with segregation, and he had to deal with deal with not even having the ability to vote, and having to deal with what I would imagine is sort of that idea that, black people need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and they need to take responsibility for their actions, um, and all that stuff. And then sort of that coming from sort of the the average sort of white person, the average, tax paying white person that, is trying to put food on their table and wants to live a happy life, and finding themselves compelled to, speak on those issues as if they also are experiencing those things and they're
Right.
getting over it themselves. And
Right.
so, I think that is, I think that there's parallels with sort of the experiences that black people have had and the responses that, some white communities have with, uh, as they sort of see things play out, where they're like, oh, I don't, I just want to live my life and I want to worry about the things that like I can control, and that's their problem. Why are they bringing it on my timeline? And it's like, no, this is an American problem, much like, going to war in Iraq, much like, dealing with terrorism, much like all these different things. It's just that, because it's black people, you feel like it's, not worthy of your time or attention.
Well, so I'm going to jump in here because I think that it's an interesting point that you've just made, and I don't know if we've started officially to the Steve and Kate.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Hello,
we're in
everybody.
the throes right now.
We're in already, but hi, everybody. Welcome back to Steve and Kate and our podcast. And we talk about, I think we initially, when we first started this podcast, even that we started with the desire to address the horror of what is going on in our country with, and the different perspectives of Black and white people more specifically. And as we've been doing this, I feel like that there are different variations of white people. I feel like I don't necessarily well represent the white perspective voice. I can represent the peripheral of what I get from people, but I don't know that I share an opposing vantage point to your vantage point necessarily. So sometimes I feel like I'm not truly representing the voice that is the more controversial voice between Black and white people. Yet, I believe that I've tried to, without apology and not walk on eggshells, try to present some of these very sincere, honest perspectives that I have experienced myself or other people that I know, and on the peripheral of it. So wanting with addressing what you, to your point just a couple minutes ago, when you say it's like much like the Iraq War, Vietnam, or all of this stuff, you know, even with war, you know, in the initial states of everything, there's this fervor around it, right? And then everybody's in it. And after the Vietnam War, I remember seeing the Vietnam War on television when I was a kid. And because it brought it home, and the protests and what was happening to our country because of what people were seeing on television. And then the vets came home and they weren't being taken care of. And there's just this whole gaggle of what happened back then. But the government made a decision. The government made a decision that they would never air any longer the war on primetime television, on the news, as it was back in the day. It's not, they don't do it like they used to anymore. It was like you were living the war in your home.
Yeah.
But my point is that there's a time when people really care, and they care, they're angry, and they're really angry, and they're fervent, and all of this kind of stuff. And then there comes this kind of, it's like war weary, you know, they're weary of, we're weary of Iraq, we're weary of the Middle East, we're weary of Afghanistan. We, you know, there were people who were weary of Vietnam. You know, the vets came back and got treated like they were, you know, lepers. You know, they were rejected by our country, not hailed as vet heroes. They were, you know, they were treated less than human in lots of ways, and nobody cared about them, and thought that they, you know, some of the people thought that they were, you know, the war was so terrible, and it was their personal responsibility for the terror of the Vietnam War, the vets. So the soldiers got treated, you know, like anti-Americans, actually. So I'm just talking about actually the point of it being kind of war weary. People don't want to talk about the Iraq War anymore. You know, they don't want to talk about Afghanistan, the
Yeah.
Middle East. They're tired of it. They're like, we did it for so long, and you know, we're over it. We're not even paying attention to the soldiers anymore. We're not even talking about the soldiers anymore, who are still in those countries, you know, still serving, because they're over it. They don't want to think about it. They just want to get back to their lives. And I think that that's what I'm addressing with this. And it's not unusual. And it happens faster and faster. It's like you're a minute hot, and it's a big deal until the next big thing comes along. And then we go from there. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened, even with the coronavirus. And I told you, I'm still in Arizona, and you know, I know two relatives of mine that I haven't seen. My aunt, her son, and his girlfriend. The girlfriend and my cousin both have coronavirus, and they've now isolation. But there's other people who are testing positive. Like there's a circle of at least 9 people that have it here in Arizona. And the governor gets on. And he's like, okay, we've got to be more careful, but you know, okay, we asked 50% capacity, you know, for the restaurants. They're going to keep them open and only at 50% capacity, but we're asking you to stay home. And it's contradictory. And anybody who's working in those restaurants aren't making any money, and they can't collect unemployment. So it's just like the coronavirus, and people are weary of that too. You know, they're
Yeah.
weary of it all. They're like, oh my God, they want 2020 to just go away. Like it's been a personal affront to their, you know, lives. So the Black Lives Matter, I feel like there's still things happening for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean,
But
like Portland
people
just,
are war weary of it, is
yeah,
my point.
like I think Portland just released numbers of you know, of having one of the higher rates of police brutality during this sort of like time period from like I want to say the end of May to throughout June.
Mm,
Whereas you know like New York and places have like 10 to 12 per 100,000 or million residents,
mm-hmm.
and Portland has 88 per million residents, where
How many in New York? How many in New York?
it's like 10 to 12.
Oh, and in Portland, or in Oregon, it's 88,
Yes,
or the
it's
same.
88.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Per, looking at all the hotspots, it's like, like a sort of like a lull where like
Yeah.
everybody's around like, 10 to 20. And then Portland's like all the way up here at like 80, 80, 88, 90. And so
Is
it's
it
sort of
is it Portland or is it in Oregon?
it's Portland. So
It is in Portland.
they're
Oh,
looking
wow.
at major cities where protests are happening
Okay.
consistently. And so like New York,
Okay.
LA, different places like that. And so it was just really, it was really interesting to see that and look at sort of the understanding sort of the context and the history of like, police brutality, particularly in like these areas that often have higher populations of minority communities, higher populations of minorities in communities, and just sort of juxtaposing that with sort of the lack of minorities in areas, and how that translates to numbers of police brutality. It's just very interesting to see sort of that correlation, and because that they yeah, it's just very interesting to sort of like see that correlation, and
Well, like I said, it still feels like it's like I feel like some of this is going to go back underground, on the down low, as far as, okay, now the fervor is over, you know. Just it's still occurring. But the ramped up element of it feels like it's wound down, just
uh,
like with gun violence and stuff like that. But I'm just saying that it's still occurring. Now is the time where hopefully from all the protests and the organizations that are involved are hopefully speaking to the authorities to implement the areas of change that are being desired to have happen. And listen, there's still people who think like defund the police. They're like, really? And they're not hearing like the whole perspective of it. They're just like, oh yeah, okay, so you have a
yeah,
problem and somebody's robbing you and you want to get rid of the police. Well, good luck with that then. Nobody's going to show up, or you know what
well,
I'm saying?
yeah, or you'll get the response like you'll get the response like uh more white people get more white people are are victims of police brutality than black people.
Well,
uh
the president just said that.
yeah,
The
yeah,
president
he's
just,
you
I
know
saw just the blurb. I never read
yeah,
anything he says.
yeah,
I had to see it. It's on.
yeah,
Like,
we're
yeah, well, white people are beaten up by cops more than black people.
yeah, he was like more white people are affected or whatever. It's like if you're looking at the numbers, obviously black people make up 13% of the population, and they essentially compared to comparable to what, like 60% of the population, which like the white community is. And so we're looking at like 60% versus 13%. And then we're looking at, okay, based off of the numbers, based off of raw data, obviously you're going to have more, but the difference is literally like I think it's like four or 500 for like white people, and then there's like 300-400 for like black people. And so it's like, even if like that's a valid statement, but it's unreliable. It's unreliable to use that statistic to plead a case saying that it affects white communities more. Um, and and it's just sort of like we're seeing sort of like that pushback of like, it's not this isn't that big of a deal, for black people. They're blowing it out of proportion or whatever. When you actually look at sort of the how it impacts
And
the community.
well, and most people won't look at that data. They don't want to understand it that way. They
Yeah,
want to go back to their own, comfort, which now is noted as their white privilege, they get to go back and like, let's just calm down here.
Yeah.
And what you've just stated, though, what is being presented is, look, more white people are being beat up by police officers than Black people. And to my point, when we first actually began this podcast, as a white woman, I was arrested twice years ago for nothing big deal. One, I was pulled over by a sheriff here in Arizona on a motorcycle, and literally what he did to me was disgusting. He didn't like violate me sexually or anything. I'm not talking about that. He was able to take me out of the car, put cuffs on me, sit me on a hot day in the sun for as long as he wanted, throw me in jail for 10 hours. I had no voice. I had no idea what I wasn't listened to. So like to the point of that, my point was, as the president is saying, well, more white people are being beat up by the police. The point is that the police, there's a problem that the police force has this power that they believe that they can treat people like this, unaccounted for, carte blanche. And the communities, I'm not kidding you, every time I drive down the street and I look to see who's being pulled over, the majority of the cases, it's a minority that's being pulled over. Carte blanche across the board. Every time I look, it's a minority in the car being pulled over. Now I don't know if that's just per chance, but I'm just telling you, I've noted that.
Yeah. Well, I think the data backs it up that it's impactful. It impacts minority communities more because if we're looking at the percentage of that community having these experiences, the percentage of that community is higher because the overall population is low. And so using that raw data, when you contextualize it within the general population of that community compared to the general population of a white community, the percentage for white people is much lower,
Right.
and
Yes.
and so it kind of goes to that point of like, you see the impact, you see, like, you bore witness to the impact that that police brutality has, and you don't, and the context of that data proves it. It's not the raw data, because nobody ever justifies anything based off of raw data. I mean, like, it's just, if that's the case, we would say that, like, we should all not have toasters, or like we should all not be driving. It's but what we do with driving and plane crashes and cybersecurity and all those different things, we contextualize that data so that it makes sense. And often it's troubling to see that approach isn't taken across the board with things.
Well, again, and this is why this bringing up this Indiana, the lynching thing, is so shocking to me, because again, it's raw. It's not only unapologetically there.
Mm-hmm.
It is arrogantly, indignantly, furiously, F you, in your face. We have every right. And if you disagree with me, they will hurt you. And they don't care. And so, and this is where I said to you once before that I wish, when you take somebody out of their element and you put them into the element that they oppose, mm-hmm. and you take this flagrant big, man that is like, fuck you, and he's using all this verbiage that's intentional, as if I'm not adhering to any politically correct, perspective. He's just like, I got no time for you. I don't care about you. I'm going to keep doing this and you're never going to change my mind. And I'm better than you are. Period. End of
Yeah.
story. Take that guy. I want to take that guy and I want to put him into the real culture of Black America. You know, the same community, a family who's struggling to make it and try to get along, and they have their own, their experiences. And I know these things have been done to some degree before, but again, until you walk in a different perspective, in a different shoe, you don't understand who you are. He's used to being that guy. He's around that guy. He's with other people who are in agreement with how they are. They all are okay with who they are. And there's just no talking into changing them. I've listened to guys who used to be a part of the KKK, leaders in the KKK, and them saying they want you to pick a fight with them. They're poking you just so that they can get into a fight with you.
Yeah, it's that sort of like Rocky under that, like, it's the reason why people love Rocky movies. They love being that sort of hated underdog. I think that's sort of ingrained in sort of American pop culture.
Well, I don't think that they believe that they're hated or that they're the underdog. They don't think that they're the underdog. They don't think that they're the underdog. They think that they are, the top of the hill guy. They think everybody else is stupid. Yeah. They know it all. And everybody else, they don't give a shit about. And if they try to challenge the hill, they will beat the hell out of them. And that's it. And they're not the underdogs. I'm saying they're used to, look, and the psychological, if somebody were to go, let's break this guy down psychologically. There's lots to do there. There's lots to break it down. And there's lots of underneath
like
all of that.
Histories of domestic abuse or
all of
experiencing that as a kid.
And this is where, even when I was talking about Black on Black crime last week, right? So and it was like, that's just a terminology and all that kind of stuff. But like this white version of this white on white,
so
stupid
it's what they call white on white genocide.
White on white genocide and black on black genocide. Let's do that. Okay. And let's just take the white guy and put him in the black community of where that's happening, because there's a mindset that's not so different necessarily. And it's very flagrant. And it all comes out of abuse, and I'm not, but you find somebody to pick on. It's a wolf mentality, Wolfgang mentality of we're better, beating your chest and all that crap, And the guy who was the head of the KKK, or a leader within the KK, and he came out of it, and he said it actually was on social media where he was kind of, writing all this stuff, and a guy sincerely started asking him questions without being like puffed up, you're a troll or whatever, just really was like, I'm asking questions and I don't understand. And that started shifting him. And literally that was what got him out of the KKK, was those kinds of interactions. And it's like, so that leads me into this other thought that I had this week, because I am trying to be more aware of what is inherently given to me. And I pay attention to other things. So I've chosen to do that. Like I have made a choice. I don't necessarily have to shout it from the rooftops. This is my version of shouting it from the rooftops, or being productive with it. And I'm listening to people without jumping on them. I'm trying to listen to people without, and maybe ask a question, but where it's going to be productive. I have no interest in the fight. But So I had to go to the store a few times this week, and it happened to be Walmart. And some
good things be happening in Walmart.
Yeah, well, and listen, I know. Listen, I was a single mother with three kids without a lot of money.
I live in Walmart,
and I was like, listen, you can say whatever you want, and there's lots to be said about it. But guess what? It saved me as a single mother. The prices, the whole shebang. I don't want to buy from China either, but now anymore. But I'm just saying, back in the day,
Well,
I have no apologies for the fact that it helped me, and I have no judgment. The people that work there, they work hard. It's not, all this kind of stuff. So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and there's
Like,
a lot of different not color, like a lot of variations of people there. There was this one woman there without a mask on. I thought, ooh, I must want to really finally confront some people, because she was walking around. They put a sign out there like, everybody has to wear a mask, and she's like strutting around, and I had to hold myself back twice, 3 times. Like, there's a sign at the door, and she's strutting around in her shoes and her outfit, and I'm like, ooh, I was so mad. And I was like, why do you think you don't have to wear a mask? Can you tell? Like, I really wanted to poke at that hornet, and I thought, oh, don't start. But anyways, I digress. But here's what I was aware of. And I grew up where my father, when I was a kid, my mom had to go into the hospital, and there were 6 of us, and kids at that time under 12 weren't allowed at the hospital. So my dad always broke the rules. He was a cop who thought, we don't have to adhere to the rules. And he was like, you kids are going to get to go see your mother. And he said this, he goes, listen, you just walk like you belong there. Don't look to the left or the right. Just walk straight forward, and nobody will stop you. And I'm like, and so that was true. We got to go see my mom. And I'm not kidding you. That's how I walk through, and I don't ever think anybody's looking at me. Like, I really don't. There's times when I think I notice people are looking at me. But overall, I don't walk through and go, oh, people are whatever. So in Walmart, I've always gone in and out of Walmart. Whenever I've gone in and out. And yes, now people are standing at the doors, and I've seen them stand at the doors before. But guess what? They're there to look at your receipts for what you bought.
yeah.
I never even stop. Like even with a cart, I just keep walking. I just I bought stuff. But I literally, as I was walking out of Walmart the other day, I noticed somebody stopped in front of me, and I walked around them without stopping and walked straight out the door. And it's not just this time that I've done this. I have done this for years, and I have noticed that, okay, they're looking at receipts. I'm like, well, they haven't ever asked me, like, excuse me, we need to look at your receipt. And I thought, that's white privilege right there. That's white privilege right there. I don't feel like I need to stop. I'm not stealing anything, and nobody's challenging me. I'm
Yeah.
walking like you have no, like, and if they were to stop me and go, it's just our policy, we check everybody's receipts, I would have said, oh, okay, well, here's my receipt or whatever.
Yeah.
But nobody ever stops me. And it's usually, well, not always, but more than not, it's usually a person of some color,
Yeah.
not necessarily
Or
white.
it's like an elderly person.
Or somebody like not as older than me, but
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But nobody ever challenges me. Nobody ever, and maybe I just have that air like I'm fine, just leave me alone. I don't know, but whatever. But I thought to myself, wow, that is really, really something that, everybody else knows that they need to stop, but I don't ever feel like I need to stop. And if they want to stop me, they can, but they never do.
Yeah.
And I thought, is that because I'm white, or is it because I'm walking like nobody will pay attention to me if I just keep going? I don't know,
I
but
think, I think that I think that if you weren't white, I think if you were like a very dark skinned lady,
right.
that, that sort of just walks around, it
Yeah,
would garner attention, and somebody would be more likely compelled to like say something.
you're
Uh,
right. And I know that we were also talking, so this is me being really honest with you as well. Not proud of it, but just decided that I'm going to be we started talking about the internal dialogue that I have with myself. At times where nobody sees the internal dialogue of what you
yeah.
say, no matter what you present to yourself,
Oh
you
yeah.
never, and I started saying to you that I notice Black people whenever, listen, I notice a lot of people, but certainly Hispanic, color, different nationalities, and I'm a curious person as well.
Yeah.
So my internal dialogue is always curious as to who they are. How did they get to where they are? Surprise that some may have, or how did they get it? That kind of thing. So I was telling you that on a street I saw, and there's different, there's different levels of class: white, black, or Hispanic, Asian,
Yeah.
Native American, and all of that. And that is represented here very, very specifically. And I go to, what's called the Food City. It's basically a Hispanic grocery store here in Arizona. And I'll go in there. And again, you're the minority when you walk in there. So I'm okay with being in different cultures, but I'm curious as to how they are, who they are. And and you see class represented as well as color.
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling you that I saw this guy in the street, and he had his pants down his butt, and he had a do-rag on his head. But I'm thinking, what are you doing here, dude? Like what? And I don't know what he was doing there, but I noted it's an all white everything. And he's like coming out of the side street. And I'm just like, what are you doing here? And I'm very curious. And it looks shady, but I don't know that it's shady, but it looks shady. So that's an honest thought that I had. Yeah. The other day I had to go to the phone store, and the kid that I was dealing with, and I am that white person who always tries to be very nice to a person of color. I'm just being honest with you. I am trying to be nicer to everybody. But I'm extra nice. I'm noticing that I'm even extra nice, and I try to be more complimentary. And it's really still sincere, but I'm noticing that I make more, even a stronger effort. I'm noticing.
Yeah.
I had to go back, and the dude that helped me was really cool, young, and he happened to be a black kid. But he was very good. I just want to be build up. You're fantastic. Do you not, I'm sure you hear that in life, but you're fantastic. And I want to reinforce. And you know what? I do that, but I've done that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've done that for minority kids for a long time. I used to be at a camp in New York in the Catskill Mountains. And we had black kids from New York, minority kids, but major was black young kids come up for this Christian camp ministry. And literally we would check all the heads, the kids that came in, and every kid, white or whatever. But I have always wanted to the underdogs, to any underdog I felt was an underdog. Regardless, I always wanted to, I would go over and above to speak well into their soul. That's all I wanted to ever do. And so that's a lot of what that is as well. But I had to go back. And when I went back, there happened to be these two, black women who were, curvy, beautiful women. Their hair was done braided, beautiful. And all I keep thinking is that is a lot of money, all the stuff that they got, a lot of their hair, they're beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And they were, and I was having a problem with trying to get stuff into the cloud. But I got to tell you, I thought to myself, what do you do? Because what I see is an expensive life. I wear cut off jeans and, look like who did it. I walk around raggy, I never wear makeup, and I, barely, whatever. So they're done and they look fabulous, but I'm that's not inexpensive to do. And I'm what do you do that you can afford to do all of that? And as I was going through with my phone, the one woman was helping. She goes, oh, I used to work for Apple and blah, 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 blah. And so it's a curiosity to me. I'm curious as to what do you do, because you're a well-to-do Black person. What do you do? That's an honest, isn't that terrible? But I'm being honest with you. That's what I do. What do you do?
And I think that is sort of the priming that, we as a culture is sort of going through right now. We're trying to dismantle. It's it's not mainstream to see that. That's not a default that you think of when you think about Black people.
Mm-hmm.
When you when you're sort of experiencing the world and you're, you know, watch TV and you see movies and all these things that sort of prime us growing up. And then when you actually experience the world, it's actually counter to that. You know,
Hmm.
it's almost as if you went to school for a trade, and then when you got to the job, you realize you don't know anything about the trade because things have changed. You know, technology has come in and all
Yeah.
those different things, and so now you got to relearn everything. You gotta like, you know, figure out what things you could sort of keep, and then you gotta figure out what things you need to rewire. And that's what's happening right now. I mean, that's a
Right.
perfect example. That is literally what's happening right now. It's just that
Well,
it's happening
but I'm
across
challenging
everything.
myself. I'm being honest with the fact that I do have this internal dialogue, and thank
Yeah.
goodness it's not an external dialogue, but it may be something that I even, you know, admit somehow. I emote through my body that
Yeah.
I'm curious, or I don't know, or I'm looking, or my brain is going, wow, like, you know, but now I do it with other people as well. I look at people and I go, how do you have this much money to spend? This is expensive. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do it. And
Yeah.
I'm like nickel and diming things. And people are like, she was like, okay, and can I have a watch with that too? And I'm like, that's a
Yeah.
lot of money, man.
Yeah.
What do
But
you do? Because this is a lot of dough. I can see that everything you have is a lot of money. I'm curious as to what you do. And
yeah.
you're two black women, and it's like, so I'm curious because they are very successful. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
successful. I
it's
don't know if very
like
successful, but they're successful.
that story, I think, often it is like a perfect example of like a counter to sort of the phrase, like, I don't see color. Because often you'll see people in the tech space, you'll see people in sort of privileges that revolve around class, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and to
Mm-hmm.
sort of and to look at them as people regardless of their skin color, and not sort of trying to contextualize. I've never seen a black person that did this or did that. um it's without, if you literally do not acknowledge, like if you literally do not see that, then that won't frame your sort of, it won't inform your perceptions of that person. But the reality is that that's not how things work. Like you see somebody that's white, that is more well off in doing things, that is often the default that we've grown accustomed to.
That's not as much of a surprise to me
Yeah, yeah,
as it
it's
is a
not it,
black person. And if I'm real,
yes.
and I'm being, again, we're here to be honest, and you
Yeah.
can, if anybody's listening here and go, she is a stupid woman. I listen, I try not to be, but I'm just being honest about, we've agreed that we're not going to walk on eggshells here. And I'm
Oh yeah.
not trying to be insulting, but the truth is that this is the internal dialogue that I have.
Yeah.
And look, I always wonder how people make it, because I have tried to make it, and it's not easy to make it.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not
no.
easy
It's
for
it's it's
me.
not.
It's not. You and I are very similar in the fact that we have a creative spirit. I've tried to develop television shows. I have inventions that I came up with before other people, and other people made them happen.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not a stupid woman. I'm an entrepreneurial spirited woman.
Yeah.
I raised 3 kids. I have 4 grandchildren. People, respect me, but I don't have any money. I'm cheap. I'm good with my money, and
Yeah.
but I
Well,
don't
well,
have
you're you know, you're
a tip.
working class,
Just,
like
I am
it's like you.
totally working class. No, I
Yeah.
would tell you that I'm not just working class. I would probably tell you, and I don't say this to diminish myself, because money was never what mattered to me. What
Yeah.
mattered to me was helping people, and in the way that I could help people. And so I live very frugally,
Hmm.
and the services that I charge for the trauma work that I do, I can do it at a very low cost to the
Yeah.
person that I'm working with. And that matters more to me than, I'm a minimalist. I'm totally a minimalist. So
Yeah.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. I'm
I
okay with
mean,
that. But
yeah.
certainly, but just know though, I'm like, how did you figure that out? You got to really figure that out, and you've been successful at it.
Yeah.
And so
And I think
that's
the
more.
and I think the difference is, and I have like a literally, I've experienced this, where the difference is between somebody that's genuinely curious and somebody that's racist is that
Right.
they'll look at that situation and they'll say, how is it that you as a black person are able to do that and me as a white person has not figured it out, you know?
So here's Stephen so I may not put it like that myself,
Yeah.
but there is a part of me that asks that question, if I'm honest with you. That is
Yeah.
so if I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
not internally, I'm like, how did you do that? How did you
Yeah.
do that? I can't do that. As a white person, I can't do that. How can you do it as a black person? And that is just, oh, but it's
Yeah.
true. That's, I
And
have
that's,
thought that at
and I
times.
think that that's just a part of being human, you know. That's a
God,
part of that's a part
terrible.
of, well, I think
But
that's a
it's
part of,
honest.
well, it's a part of being human, as a white person living in America and understanding the history of America, where you're,
I'm always surprised when I see a well-to-do black person. And I'm curious about it. I'm like,
yeah, it's like, you know,
how do you
how did
do that?
how did you do that and you're not an athlete or you're not a rapper, you
Yeah,
know,
like
like it's
you're
like,
that's
and,
right. Like,
and so
how
and
did you
so
do that?
and
Yeah.
that's I think that's sort of like the unpriming that Americans are doing, you know, where we're seeing that we're seeing redefinitions of what black people, the capabilities of black people and all that stuff, you know. And
But we also haven't seen, I remember reading recently, Meghan Markle, Prince Harry's wife.
mhm,
Um, you know, she's been skewered in the media, and it's been
oh yeah,
revolting. And their stepping away is solely so. I was around with Princess Diana. We had children, and
mhm,
so any mother when she died adopted her boys. My children know I've adopted her boys. They're part of my, like, and it's a weird thing, but it is. And when Prince Harry married Meghan, um, it was fantastic. And what happened to them and what happened to her specifically,
yeah,
um, and anybody who doesn't know why he left the monarchy, with what happened to his mother and what was happening to his wife and now his son was going to happen as a biracial little boy, is an idiot if they don't understand why Prince Harry walked away and his own trauma with what happened to him. That
yeah,
said, Meghan Markle's best friend, you know, gained much notoriety over the past few years for being her best friend. And she's a white, she was her stylist and all this kind of stuff. But she was promoted. She had gigs and she got, well-to-do and became well-known because of her association, more well-known because of Meghan. And then when this whole Black Lives Matter and everything happened, there's a black model who, of course, I can't remember her name right now. I saw on Instagram post about it. And Meghan Markle's best friend went after this girl. And it became, global news that the best friend of Meghan Markle's, okay, I'm going to look it up really quickly
mhm,
because I'm tired of not being able to refer to accurate information. And the fight. But it was Jessica, that's it. Her name is Jessica Mulrooney. And there was, so Jessica Mulrooney, being the best friend of Meghan Markle, has had a status, and she took that very, she benefited from her relationship with them. Well, then, took Sasha Exeter. Have you heard of this?
no,
Okay. Who is an influencer on YouTube, and she's a model and she's done commercials and all this kind of stuff. Well, Jessica Mulrooney made comment to some of the stuff that Sasha Exeter put out on social media, and she commented on it. Well, then Jessica, Meghan's friend and white, and Sasha Exeter, being this beautiful, single mother, Black woman, model, trying to be a social influencer, all this kind of stuff. Jessica kind of like tried to one up her and threaten her, basically. Like, I'm gonna win this, and you better be careful. And then she tried, of
Mm.
course, to back away from it. And she's lost everything. Jessica Mulroney lost all of her gigs, everything. Even Meghan Markle came along and was like, didn't like this.
Yeah.
So like, this kind of like, better than, you're right. I don't see everyday life. It's not part of my everyday experience that the multitude of Black people are successful, well-to-do. I don't live in those neighborhoods. I saw it
Yeah.
when I was in Chicago with the attorneys that I live with, but on a day in and day out basis, I don't see, that. So when I see it, I'm always like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like, how did you do it? And yes, you're a Black woman. What did you do to be able to be successful and have a good cash flow and look, they could, just like a white person could be living off a credit card for all we know, spending money stupid, but that's not what that looked like. It was like, so I question it. And I wonder, like, what did you do? How did you do it?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. And that's what Jessica Mulroney thought too. She's like, she thought she could do what she did and get away with it because she was the like uppity white woman,
Yeah.
with the connections, and got slapped
Yeah.
hard.
It's the conversation of like meritocracy. It's like, are you upset that they have the skills to do what they do to get that money, or are you, it's just really interesting. you know um it's just really interesting to see sort of those responses, and what people will do to or react to in certain situations. It's just, yeah, I just find it, this is where I wish I was an anthropologist, where I just like, pretty much a professional people watcher and study those different things. But yeah, I think, to sort of wrap up the conversation, um yeah, this is just it, it's just a very interesting time uh to sort of like watch happen. uh I feel like this is one of those just like crazy times that like we all know is just going to be in history books,
It
and
is going to be the history books.
like, and just
And
really to have that awareness of like knowing that, like it's kind of crazy.
well, when you look back at the equivalent of the 1920s or the 1820s, and we now look back at that era, this was just commonplace of that time.
Yeah.
Whatever was happening at the time, it was just the time. And how we now reflect back on it, I'll be long gone when that occurs. But like, the reflection of it all will
Yeah.
be, it lives on forever, whatever is going on right now, especially with the social media that's out there about it all as well.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about these things. And I think that the requirement of white America in the persistence and to challenge themselves, and how can white America challenge white America. I was just watching this YouTube Black conservatives debate Black liberals and American politics, and it's a Black group. It's on Vice, and
Yeah.
I was watching it on YouTube, and it's very interesting because it's Black conservatives with Black liberals talking about who did you vote for, why, talking Republican and Democrat. You do not see that on television,
No.
on normal, like, you don't see it. And like, it's very interesting. And then you get like, people of color representing themselves, not somebody else helping them represent them.
Well, you
Or,
get the opportunity to see them as people.
and there you go. That, and I want to see more of that. And this is, I
Yeah.
think, what I'm talking about is that white America needs to see, most white Americans, I feel like I try more than the normal white person, at least in my circle. I try more in some ways. So if this became a more of a norm to be able to see this, I believe the integration and the shift and change that is coming. This is going to be the kinds of things that regular white America needs to start to see and not be surprised by anymore, that there are, we see regular Black America
Yeah,
as
it shouldn't
regular
be a
Black America.
novelty.
It's not a
It should
novelty.
it shouldn't
Yes,
be a
there you go.
novelty for
There
entertainment.
you go. That's right.
And that's what I think sort of the general, I mean, that's what I feel the general Black population wants at the end of the day.
Right.
When they want to be seen as more than just objects for entertainment and, you know, opportunities for sort of mainstream white America to not worry about their problems.
Well,
You
and
know?
I think that what we've all seen mostly is the extremes. We talked about that before. I gave the example of how Snoop Dogg's like, look, I tried to do a romantic record and nobody wanted it, or just a
Yeah,
good music record and nobody
yeah,
wanted it. They wanted me to go back to, the stuff that I've done. And
yeah,
that's true. But the more white America sees the norm of Black America and the variations within any
yeah,
culture, not just Black, but in any culture. Look, I can look at Hispanics and have the same thoughts that I have, you know, um, that I just stated to you earlier. I'm
yeah,
not. Look, I look at a lot of people and go, "How did you get there?" But I'm just being honest with. It's like what surprises me, what I find interesting. I'm curious. So I personally believe that seeing more of, and I don't like when I contacted you saying I want to do something. I want to be proactive about it. I want to help shift this perspective. It has to change. How can we do it? Um, I do believe it's in Black America being well represented outside of the arenas that they've actually been used. Even
yeah.
in the football, in the athletic arena, they're making lots of money. But let me tell you something, it's still, they're being owned. They're
Well,
getting what they
it's
want, but they're
the
owned.
yeah. I think and I think this sort of, and I guess this ends up being sort of like the last point, but the realities of sort of like athletics and the representation in athletics, um, it appears as if they've reached the pinnacle of success, but at the end of the day, we know all the stories of, like Hall of Famers that can't even walk and they're 40 years old. We know all the
Mm-hmm.
stories of, how CTE and stuff leads them down these paths that
That's
were
right.
more likely to be, for suicide and
Right.
and all those different things. And so, it's like you get sort of you get distracted by this, like, oh, look at them, they're making money.
The
Everybody,
shiny. It's
like
the
everybody,
shiny.
like the whole industry is making money. Like that. It's not that they're making money. Literally, the industry is making money.
And if
And
they're making that much money,
yeah,
if they're making that much money,
you know,
it's the man behind the curtain. The man
yeah,
behind the curtain is making like triple, quadruple of what, if they're
yeah,
giving this person this much money, well, everybody behind them is making a
yeah.
lot more.
And then 10 years later, who's more
Right.
likely to actually benefit from those
Right.
opportunities, and
Right.
what do they actually look like?
Right.
And so that's where it's like, yeah, everybody's making money,
Yeah.
everybody, but who's the ones that are at the most risk and have to sacrifice the most for the least?
Right.
and and
Right.
and, and that always ends up being the conversation. you know uh,
And it is, yeah, it is. And
and
that's why I think to see the more norm of a
yeah,
culture is what's needed for the white culture to have a better broad understanding.
yeah,
It changes it, like the more familiar you are with something, the more you embrace it. Look, white America and evangelical America and all of this has embraced like an Ellen DeGeneres, like, and there was a time when that just could not have happened, and
Yeah,
she
that
lost a
wasn't a
lot.
thing.
That wasn't, look, Oprah Winfrey is beloved. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I know I'm taking extremes of representations of what we're talking about, but I'm saying white America does not see Black Oprah. Do you know what I mean? Like black, they don't, not like black, Oprah Winfrey, the Black woman who's a talk show,
Yeah.
everybody knows Oprah, like Cher, everybody know, well, you may
Well,
not, but
it's I think the conversation, like a timely one, is looking at the career of Viola Davis,
yeah,
where she's coined as like the Black Meryl Streep, where
yes.
and she's I think she was on the cover of Vogue, where like she was on the most recent cover of Vogue, and like the like sort of her being outspoken about the opportunities that come with her, even though she be putting in work on How to Get Away with Murder. Like she should be revered as sort of an icon, a mainstream icon, and not a Black icon.
But
And
when she first came out on the scene, when I first knew of her, and she had been already in the theater district,
yeah.
she already
Hmm.
had been working in the industry, and she even has spoke, like when The Help came out years ago. That's when I first noticed her. And what's so funny is she was in a different movie than that. She was in the movie with Meryl Streep called Doubt, and she played a mother of a little Black boy, and it was about pedophilia within the Catholic Church. If you ever see the movie, go watch it, with Meryl Streep. And that's where
Yeah.
her and Meryl first met, and then but Meryl hailed her, and then when Viola came out with The Help, and she was hailed, but she talked out loud about how difficult it was for her with her own hair identity as a Black woman, but how she'd worked in the industry for so long and the opportunities didn't come. And absolutely, she has evolved. I've watched her evolve,
Oh yeah.
and she is an icon. She's amazing. She's talented, stunning in what she does. Um, but she's evolved in her own, how do you say, Blackness? I don't know, because I saw the struggle originally when she first
Well,
started talking about it.
it's she's been, her convictions have not shied away from her Blackness. And I think that is sort of that is often sort of the I guess the mainstream coming of age story for Black professionals,
Mm-hmm.
is how to be successful but also be Black,
Mm-hmm.
and accept and not shy away from that. And I think
And
that's
that's what
the,
she's stepping into. That's what she's stepping into, like,
yeah.
finally, probably, right?
Well, because we all know the Black people that have found success but have sort of shied away from addressing Black issues or being Black,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and sort of being one of culture but one of prestige as well. Often it's like, okay, if you were a part of the Black community, you are seen as ghetto, or you do these things or do those things. And so in order to find success, you have to shy away from that savagery to reach a level of esteem that people revere. And often, we're seeing now that, like, you don't have to do that. You could have
Yeah,
one and you could have the
but
other.
but what I can honestly say to you, though, is how Black culture has been represented often more than not. You have your exceptions to the rule. You have your Kobe's, who everybody likes. You have Michael Jordan. You have, Oprah Winfrey. You have, Sidney Poitier. Within the white culture, who would universally say adored, revered, beloved, all of those things, right? And so it's like they're different. And then you have your rappers and your other, and then you see, when you get together, you see the cultures clash. Like when there's a Black, I don't know, show on television that's an award show, right? And you see people being disrespectful, and it's just like, okay, you don't see just normal, real Black people who aren't all these extremes. They're not the highest elite of people, and they're not, a negative representation of Black America. those are the two familiarities to normal white America. Normal Black America has not been represented, other than the Cosby Show to some degree. Now
Well,
it's changed.
yeah. Well, normal life outside of BET, outside of
Right.
BET, there's no outside of BET, white people are dictating how black people are
That's
seen,
right. That's
you
just what I'm
know?
saying to you. That's just
And
what I'm saying. And
yeah,
that is what will change if in this culture now,
you know,
taking this and parlaying it and
yeah,
them saying white America needs and wants, and that is where the infusion is going to change. How, like, I'm telling you, this thing I'm watching, I'm like, I'm loving it because I love seeing all the variations in,
you
to
know,
say intelligence and all that. It's stupid, but it's
yeah,
true.
I think, yeah, I mean, to this point, I guess the things people should watch or listen to or watch or whatever, their homework is check out, a lot of the work from like Kenya Barris and Shonda Rhimes. It's Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy, Blackish, Mixedish,
But
Grownish, like,
but you know what? Here's the other thing though. I would tell you that I've seen those shows, and I don't really watch them, but I don't watch mainstream television, to be honest. But I would challenge people who are watching or listening, sorry, go to YouTube. Start finding interesting things that are outside of even the contrived writings within a television medium, because it's really cool. It's very informative. It's going to take you deeper than just your, and listen, Shonda Rhimes has been amazing what she's done. I'm not diminishing that, but I'm just talking about the stereotypical. Go to the real. I want people to go to real, not just a representation. I want to go to real people. Really, I think that those things, with my clients, oftentimes I would say, Google a subject and then go to YouTube and watch. And that will lead you to other things that are very, of the same ilk. And that will be really, really informative and educational and just profoundly interesting. If you have a brain and you want to see different, I really recommend using your imagination. Even if you want to start with something that I would recommend, go to YouTube, and it's Vice, but just, write in Black conservative debate, Black conservatives debate Black liberals on American politics. The extended version, it's wicked cool, and it's curiously, like, informative and eye-opening, and that will lead you to other things. And I think that that's a new way to start to become not so inundated that you're overwhelmed, but you're curiously brought in, and
yeah,
you're remarkably informed anew, and not in a way that somebody's hitting you on the side of the head, forcing you to look at something differently.
yeah.
You can change your own mind. You can become more informed and interested and learn. At least that's what I'm finding. And I was always willing, but I'm finding myself really enjoying everything that I'm finding along the way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
another person you should look up is Harry Belafonte. Google, YouTube, Harry Belafonte. He is a national American treasure, and he is a Black musician, actor, activist from the 60s. And anything he has ever spoken to publicly, you want to listen to. He is just remarkable, incredible. Another recommendation.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And so with that, we got a laundry list of things that we can all go check out. Hold us off for another week,
That's
and
right.
we kind of go from there. I think it was definitely a good conversation,
It is.
and
And here's what I would like to preemptively tell you that I think I would like to try to maybe deal with next week. I want to deal with people who are of color, but have white in their history, of their Black Americans, but who are also white Americans. I'm curious about that. I'm curious about that perspective. I'm going to find the girl that I did listen to an interview, and she was talking about in the South, how they want to keep up the statues and the monuments, but she really is a representation of what the South really was about, because her ancestry is one of rape and how she even came to be. So I think that might be an interesting topic. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, any Black person that is an extension of, slavery, to an extent, has that history in them. I mean, is reflective of that history and that reality of, you know, uh, having white in them for one
Right,
reason or another.
right.
And it's just and that's something that Black communities are sort of coming to terms with, is the history of being a byproduct of race or rape. And
And not all Black, and I can't speak for Black people, but not every single person who is of biracial background has come from slavery. They may have,
oh yeah,
in a
no,
more recent age, generation, you know, they're a byproduct of a biracial marriage, and it has nothing to do with slavery as how they came to be. So
yeah.
um,
I'm speaking to more of like
the history of it all.
well, I'm speaking to more of like the population of Black people that have had lighter skin for generations,
Yes,
and
yes, definitely.
and sort of that identity of Blackness had a undertone that is one of trauma,
Right.
that is like sort of understood, but nobody ever talks about it. You
Talks
know,
about it, and I
it's
would like to talk about it.
yeah, yeah.
And I think because I think it's I was really stunned by this girl, and I thought it was profoundly tragic and interesting, and so I think so I just thought maybe for next week could maybe go that way.
Oh yeah,
So
for
maybe
sure.
we could. And
So
good time this week, and I look forward to next. Thanks for joining us if you have, and um, I'm glad we're doing this.
oh
Thanks,
yeah, for
Stephen.
sure. So on to next week.
On to next week. Have a good rest of your week. Talk
Oh
to you
yeah.
next